Welcome back once again for an update on the Israel war. I have a different friend here today. Earlier you saw Rabbi Yitzhak Michelson from Tzfat. It was very informative, and fortunately I have friends there, and the fortunate part is that they're safe right now that I can tell of, at least the ones that I know of. So, Baruch Hashem, thank you. My friend Gavriel Aryeh Sanders is here with us today, and he's going to give us his experiences so far and any insight that he has, insight that he can share, anything that's shareable, that's not sensitive. I'm going to discuss that now and let him kind of give us an update. So, brother, I'm glad you're doing safe. I'm glad you're well, you and your wife. And so, tell us a little bit about an update from what's going on up to now, with whatever information you have.
Well, war is a very surreal thing because birds sing and fly and bees buzz and flowers bloom. And we had some overnight rain last night in my area, which is a sign of blessing after the holiday of Sukkot. And then you have the drone of overhead jets and distant boom, and that sounds like thunder, but it's not. So it's this like curious mixture of influences, of factors that just distill into the word I said in the beginning, surreal. Now, this happens to be the third major Middle East conflict that I've had the dubious honor of being present to experience. I was in the first Lebanon War in 1982, living on the border of Israel, and that broke out around June the 4th or 5th, I think, of that year. And I remember, being on a bus going back to the kibbutz I lived in with fires all over the hills, rockets falling, and getting to the room where I was, and then we had to quickly run as shells fell around us. And we spent 5 days in bomb shelters. That was number one. Number two was Gulf One in 1991. I had just come back to Saudi Arabia for another, not tour, but an assignment, a contract as a teacher for the Saudi Navy. Saudi Navy, yes, they do have one that's small. And then this conflict. And of course, here in Israel, is off and on, there have been things that have gone on through the years, many things that aren't reported, incidents that happen that just don't hit the news cycle. But this is kind of dominating and breaking the news cycle. So what can I tell you? On a personal level, and you already said it, we're fine. Went out, bought some bread, and some natural baked cookies and whatever, some things we needed for our meal. And yet there's this constant, I think the right word is hypervigilance that everybody has. War brings out the best of the Jewish state. It was just days ago that people were in such polarized conflict over the state of the government, the judicial reform. I mean, these were things that were dominating and causing some, more than hairline fractures in the societal fabric. But now you just see this amazing unity that happens. Israel, all the Jews become one big family, which is very curious because a phrase that I've been saying in the streets during the holiday season, I think I made it up. It's okay if I didn't, but I think I did. And I said, I would walk up to somebody and I would say to them in Hebrew, "Tegid li b'kasha, b'ma matchil achdut." I said, "Tell me, please, with what begins the word unity, achdut?" And they say, "Lama ata mitkaven." What do you intend? What are you saying? And I'd say, "Im ach," with brother. In other words, we can only have unity when we see ourselves as part of an extended family. And by the way, I will even extend that to the Arab side of things. And what I speak enough Arabic to be able to say that, to say to someone, "Inti ana nechna ikhwan," you're my brother and we are brothers, because we come from nafs abuya, and you are the same. Your father, my father, Ibrahim. And unity is achieved by going to a power greater than something greater than yourself that can bring you together. In order for there to be a we, in the world. There has to be a you and a me. And then we pledge allegiance to that fragile entity called we, our unity. And that's a whole philosophical discussion that I'm kind of drifting into simply because my mind is like all over the place with what's going on here. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on here.
Okay.
First of all, I live in Jerusalem, but I was outside Jerusalem for the last days of the holiday of Sukkot in another area, not too far from here. And when I was walking to synagogue on Shabbat morning, I kept hearing these strange booms in the distance, thinking, why would the Israeli army be doing target practice now? And then I heard something overhead, and I looked straight up above the town I was in, and there were streaks of white, like you would see, like not sort of like contrails of a jet, but more curly and twisty.
Right.
And these were from the Iron Dome hitting different incoming projectiles way overhead. And we're talking like cloud level. So those were on an arc to reach quite a distance. So that went on through the morning. And even though it was in Israel, Simchat Torah, the day of rejoicing in the Torah, and the last day known as Shmini Atzeret, they're the same day. And it happened that these both fall out on Shabbat. So we were dancing and singing, and then all of a sudden you would hear somebody go, Azaka, Azaka, and which means there's a warning, a siren warning. And we would have to run to the what's called a room called the mamad, which is a defended or protected room. So the women in the back and the men down below downstairs where we were. That happened several times. And it's surreal because you step outside and it was a gorgeous day. It was just beautiful sunshine, puffy clouds, kind of day you just want to go for a walk, have a picnic in a park and stretch your feet out and feel like life is great. But we did not know yet what had happened. And then news began to dribble in about 100 people killed, which we couldn't fathom that. The breakthrough from the fence, we couldn't process that. And as the day wore on, and different people who needed to be connected to news sources we began to put together a picture. And then by that evening, as the holiday ended here in Israel on Saturday night, then the very grim, sobering picture came together. And it was, again, how do you process the numbers? And how do you process the barbarism? I mean, it's not fit for us to discuss what they did and even what they're doing. And then I sent you something earlier today that there's going to be a flooding of the internet with visual, graphic information of things that they've done and are doing to people, innocent people, children, women, old men, old women. And to the extent that war brings out the best of the Jewish people, it brings out the worst of this particular brand of Muslim. I mean, that's what they are, so I have to say that.
Right.
Is it the fault of the religion? I know a fair bit about Islam. I've never really talked about it on this channel, but having lived for several years in the Middle East, worked six months in Lebanon, South Lebanon, in the war zone, security zone, and then 2.5 years in Saudi Arabia. And then I've read extensively on it, lectured on the subject, and we're talking about a mentality that has to be understood, not to appreciate the behavior, but to have a context for the behavior. Because it doesn't come from nothing. It's not just crazy people who've been oppressed forever suddenly reacting, and like these demonstrations in New York lately have been attempting to portray that, this is just an oppressed people throwing off the chains. No, far from it. And I'd be, you're welcome, William, if you want to monitor any questions. If anybody had questions about this,
sure,
in the chat there.
I just had Rabbi Federo sent me a verse, because a lot of people are really taking this whole thing and putting it into the taking advantage of their faith of Christianity to really point the finger, at the Jews in a weird, like, anti-Semitic way, and it's very hurtful. But anyway, Rabbi Federo sent me a verse reference that was pretty powerful, talking about in Amos chapter 1, verse 6 and 7. You know, specifically mentions Gaza, for 3 transgressions of Gaza, and for 4, I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because they carried away captive the whole captivity to deliver them up to Edom. But I will send fire on the wall of Gaza, which shall devour their places thereof. And yeah, so there was comments about Christus saying it's just like prophecy. You know, New Testament spoke of it, and well, apparently so did TaNaCh, and it's not going to look good for Gaza. That is for sure. So anyway, I'll keep an eye on the comments right now. Any questions that I have, would like for you to real quickly give us an update on the people that we know, people of my channel, people of your families, rabbis, singers, and any family he may have there with him.
Okay, fine.
That
Yeah,
sort of thing,
I'm just glancing at the chat comments now, and thank you, Abigail, for your comment, and others of you. First of all, Rabbi Singer is doing fine. I did see him a few days ago on the streets. We had a big Feast of Tabernacles sponsored by the International Christian Embassy of Jerusalem. So we had like 3,000 evangelicals going down the street right behind me, near where I live. And I happened to run into Rabbi Singer while he was there. And there were others of us in media that were there. But he's doing fine. Others that you know who sometimes contribute to content here, that live here, that I'm in touch with, and William, you are, they're doing fine. Personally, we're okay, Baruch Hashem. Collectively, we're all very concerned, and but also, this is a time when something called chesed, which could be translated mercy or loving kindness, I like the second definition better, comes to an all-time high. And people are doing things. I want you to imagine the word to go to Gaza to start the counteroffensive came to a lot of people during the day on Shabbat. And it was at the end of a week-long, what was known as Chol HaMoed, which are the intermediate days between the first and last days of Sukkot, Feast of Tabernacles. And most observant people, don't do laundry during that time. It's considered kind of a semi sacred period in which some ordinary things called divrei chol, secular things just aren't done. Some people don't work during that time, for example, if they can afford to do it. So you have a lot of people who wear kippot, like I do, that didn't have, forgive me, clean socks and underwear. They were down to the last bits in their drawer, and they went. So, there are collections going on for the most basic of necessities to get shipped down there. The son of somebody that you and I know pretty well, loaded up a van today and ran down there with all kinds of supplies, and things are coming in from literally all over the world. There are cargo flights from where I used to be on Long Island that are coming out.
The IDF urgently requires 100.
Sorry about that. Go ahead.
That's okay. We can see you multitask.
Yeah, I'm setting up a video because you were mentioning about how they're needing clothes and.
Right.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of things that are needed, and with William's permission, we'll keep you posted, because
absolutely
most people want to do something. Even if it's a contribution of what we call chai dollar. Chai is the numerical value of 18, or some multiple of chai. And to go to a place where it's all going to get to the end destination. Because another thing that happens at a time like this, paralleling all the mercy that goes on, is that there's some merciless people who put out their hand and try to divert funds into their own pockets in the name of some kind of charity. Yeah. So we keep an eye on those things and work on things that are reputable. So, but the level of mercy, the level of loving kindness right now is at a positive, staggering high. We're talking people, they need food. They need it's not irritating, it's just inconvenient. Right. I went to a couple little stores down the street from me. I went to get water last night, and the water here, most of it comes in these like big bottles. If you can see that, there you go. There it is.
Yeah, right.
So either 1.5, 2 liter bottles. And I went down there, and The only water left was a little bit of sparkling soda water. Went to the other store, no water, because the word went out that people should set aside 3 days of foodstuffs. And so people literally ran and did that. So Baruch Hashem, we have good neighbors with water filter machines, whatever, and they gave us water. But again, this goes back to the whole surreal aspect of it, where you have to step out of what you consider to be normal,
right,
and do things differently. But any problem that I would face is it pales in its paltry compared to what they're facing down on God, what the people went through. First of all, just anybody that's watched the news is aware of. This wasn't an incursion. This wasn't a war. This wasn't an incident.
No, this was a slaughter attack. Yeah.
This is Israel's 9/11.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I don't want to derail you. I want to kind of catch you at the bottom end of your thought, and then I'll move on.
And I know that, well-meaning people, I'm looking at some of the comments.
Okay.
Jeff Johnson's asking a good question about, do we have any recommended programs to help financially? So Jeff, hold on to that thought. And if you're on our email list, we'll send something out to you and this won't be the only time that I'll give you an update. So William will keep you updated on that as well. So we'll provide some references for you on that. But I was going to say, well-meaning people say things that aren't necessarily the best timed. We have an irritating sort of missionary problem here in the holy city of Jerusalem, with people that go around with microphones and these little amplifiers that came into popularity during the COVID. I had one in my classroom on Long Island as a Hebrew teacher, because the students are behind masks and plexiglass and can't hear very well. So those are now being used to broadcast the gospel on the streets of Jerusalem, at Damascus Gate, Jaffa Gate. And here I go walking over to the shuk yesterday to get some bread, and here's Sarah out there, preaching away. And people were so upset at the insensitivity. She doesn't know me. She kind of a little bit does now. I told her I used to be on her side of things. She said, well, that's impossible, because you obviously never had a relationship with God. You're just religious. And the interesting thing about these types of personalities is they talk a lot and they listen poorly. They do the exact opposite, having two ears and one mouth. It's like they have two mouths and one ear, if that.
Yeah.
And people were very, very upset. The police came, kind of shooed them away. But again, Jerusalem brings out very strange personality types. I've been in and out of this city for, over 40 years. And anybody with any New Testament literacy, especially with the book of Revelation, is familiar with the two personages known as the two witnesses. Remember those?
Yeah.
I think I've met enough of them here that they could have a small conference. So,
right.
They show up and say, I'm one of the witnesses, and I'm looking for the other guy. And,
right.
Supposed to be slain in the streets. So happy to help you out. No, God forbid. But there is actually a psychological condition called Jerusalem syndrome. And I think that some of the missionary types that come here catch a dose of it. And the insensitivity. The good news about the person I'm speaking of now is that she doesn't speak very clearly, speaks very quickly, and quotes tons of scriptures that nobody's ever heard. And so I've had people asking me in Hebrew, what's she talking about? And so their method of delivery is definitely one that people will just stay away from. There's nothing worth listening to, but it's just irritating. And imagine as the situation, the realization of the situation here, the grim nature of it is coming to register in people's minds. And here's this human mosquito buzzing around, mouthing off things about, if we don't believe in the Messiah that already came, we're going to all burn. But it's just stupid things,
Well, let me.
Okay, I get it.
Yeah,
go ahead.
So going back to the whole point about them, needing clothes and donations and support. This is definitely a super trying time with them, not having the access to these goods, and there's numerous places that you can feel free to donate to, that you can send money to. The one that I've got shared right now, I believe, has been catching a lot of attention. So let me just play this video for you guys. Gavriel, you may not be able to hear it, but you might be able to. I'm not sure how Zoom works, but it's only
I'll catch it on my phone.
30 seconds long. So let me play this real fast, guys.
The IDF urgently requires 190 trauma kits for the brave Israeli soldiers and medics on the Gaza border. Join us as GLC partners with Unity Warriors to implore our viewers to support our IDF warriors defending Israel's future. A single medical trauma kit costs $300 and contains essential supplies, including 2 Cat 5 tourniquets, Leatherman Raptor trauma shears, stop the bleeding bandages, and more. All donations are tax deductible. Please visit unitywarriors.com/donate. Bless Israel now and stand by these heroes today.
unitywarriors.com/donate. I'll put that on your screen here shortly. But that's where we're at right now. So and you can donate for anything. You can actually, I think you can even, if you're closer by, I'm not really sure how they would donate clothing, but or how that is. Maybe it's just the money for the clothing. I'm not sure how they would even get that. Maybe you could give us some insight on that.
As far as well, I'm familiar with that one a little bit. I know that the Jewish National Fund is also one that is worth getting in touch with. Magen David Adom, which is the Red Jewish Star. I forget how you translate that even. I mean, we call it Magen David Adom. Is definitely another organization, international organization that you can get in touch with. And I'm reaching out to another friend of mine who I'll mention the next time we do an update, who's very, very well connected. And we'll have some others. Like some of the various things, that are needed are, as I said, some very basic things. And then people have been trying to get bulletproof vests, but they have to meet a certain standard. So there was some kind of an issue on that. Still a lot. So much is trying to be logistically sorted out.
Right.
But I think just if you want to start with something, start with the organization that William just put on the screen there. And for those of you in the comments that keep, telling us that this is all happening because we need to believe in Jesus, would you please do us a favor and just not do that, because you'll get blocked. It's just not nice to do that. This is not the time for you to be evangelizing.
Right.
The people that happen to have, a covenant with God that's been unbroken since it was established. So I won't get into all those things, but I do want to say, just take a spiritual moment here to suggest something that people can do, because everybody wants to do something. I mean, you may not have $18, but you might have 18 minutes or even 18 seconds. And it's interesting that there's almost a play on words between the Hebrew word for psalms and the Hebrew word for missal. They sound alike. Tehillim, Tilim. So Tehillim basically means the Psalter, the book of praises, right? And Tilim are missiles. And so we have a concept called Tehillim Neged Tilim, Psalms against the rockets.
Right.
And I know that there are people that are volunteering, participating in reciting the whole book of Psalms on a revolving basis. So they'll go in and they'll take, a chapter or several chapters, and some people are even saying the whole book of Psalms might take them 3 or 4 hours, but they're doing it.
Yeah.
Because when it comes to a war situation, especially for the Jewish people, there are those who go out to fight. There are those who go out to supply what they need. And there are those who engage in the spiritual labor of prayer, study, and keeping the nation spiritually connected. That's we were just talking about that when I went to daven the afternoon prayer a little earlier tonight. And people are conscious that there's value in all of those. Every one of them is vital. Every one of them is needed. So one of the things that I can suggest to everyone, and we've been doing slowly, unfortunately, but an interesting study on the book of Psalms, Sanders on Psalms. I am very addicted to this book. I do my best to read every day, the daily portion. Some of you will remember, now we're going way back, a preacher personality by the name of Billy Graham. You remember him, William?
Yeah.
So he had a personal habit of reading 5 Psalms and 1 proverb every day, covering both books in a month. In the Jewish world, we have a practice of reading a daily portion of Psalms. Some days it might be 2 or 3 based on their length, and other days, like 2 days ago, it might be 7 or 8 based on their length, and finishing the whole book every month. Psalms are powerful. One of the things that Psalms have the power to trigger in a person is this concept that we call tshuva, repentance, which literally means coming back. And coming back to God, coming back to the Creator's values. I'll just mention this quickly, but because the book of Deuteronomy mentions at least 5 different times the concept of cleaving to God. Well, how do you do that? You know, I'm physical. My Creator's not. I'm temporal in my present existence. My Creator's not.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, He's eternal. I'm puny and limited. He's all powerful and limitless. So how is it possible, and why would that language be used, you know, through the lips of Moses, where Hashem invites us to cleave to Him, to leidabek? Why would that? What does that mean? So the commentator Rashi gives a couple of explanations on that, which I think is worthwhile passing on to you, because this is something you can practice during this time to come closer rather than feel distanced from. Because the last thing I want, especially for our wonderful, amazing Noahide friends, you know, we want you to feel close to Hashem every bit as much as we would in such a time like this. And I can't see that.
Okay, check your messages when you get a chance.
Oh, okay, I got it. So,
okay, thanks.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
So one of the things that you can do is, you know, say Psalms. That brings you close to the Creator. And thank you for that update. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
If you haven't been in a situation like this, it's just extremely hard to relate to it. And so I ask all of you to pray in your own quiet way, ask for blessing, ask for protection, ask for provision, you know, ask for soundness of mind and clarity of purpose, and for supplies to get through. These are all really critical types of things, and that people would be unified. You know, that's very, very important. That people be unified. It happens to be in all the major wars that Israel has had, and it's been a long time since we had anything like this, and the nature of this one, there's never been anything like this. Never.
Yeah, this is not your I hate to say the term traditional war, because it's more just of a terrorist attack. The stories I've seen, I even saw a news story this morning that somebody had written in a testimonial of a girl who, I think she was probably in her 20s, who had survived a kidnapping from them while losing a couple of like one friend that she was with was killed, and then a guy that was trying to help her escape and ended up getting killed, but she wound up getting free and escaping all this stuff. And this stuff is really, really, this is like your worst nightmare. And it's like, I read mentioned too that he said a lot of the people that they would see carrying knives and guns and hammers. I mean, military people don't carry around a hammer, you know, just any kind of attack weapon. They're not even wearing military clothing. They're just like civilians from Gaza or whatever, who I guess are taking advantage of this and joining in to try to torture people. I don't know, but that's what's going on. And the things that are happening are so bad. There's so many things that I dare not even mention on air, and just all your weirdest nightmares are happening right now, with Gaza attacking Israel with just like animalistic carnage. It's just horrible.
My screen froze there for a moment.
Yep, it's still frozen there. Let me tell you what I'll do is.
You're still with me, William. I apologize.
Sure. Sure. It's moving again now. I think I see it.
Connection here is slow.
So that being said, this is
Okay,
definitely a very, very bad,
very
bad scenario. Go ahead.
Let me give you two. I think did he mention last night, Rabbi Ira, about a woman named Rachel who had 5 terrorists in her home?
I don't believe so.
So this has definitely come out in the Hebrew press. I was listening to it earlier. 5 terrorists came into the home of a woman down near Gaza, and she's very resourceful. She's a national hero now, and she did some quick thinking, older woman, and she said, "You know, you all must be hungry. Let me get you something to eat." And so she gave them all food, and while they were sitting eating, guess who came through the door and got rid of 5 people?
Nice.
The army did. That was one thing that happened.
Sounds like a story from TaNaCh almost.
It was, yeah, yes. And then there's the concept of Shabbat. This whole thing happened on Shabbat, and there's a famous expression that says, "More than the Jewish people have kept Shabbat, Shabbat has kept the Jewish people." And I want to be sensitive in what I'm saying here, but there's actually video out there floating around about this. There were 22 different communities that were affected by what happened on Shabbat morning. 22 communities. Can you imagine?
Mm.
2 of them were religious kibbutzim, and the gates were shut and they couldn't get in. And I actually saw the video of one of those places with this big, huge yellow gate stretching across the roadway. And these terrorists came up on motorcycles with various types of weaponry, and they couldn't get in just because the place was closed.
Wow.
You know, and on the flip side, there was all those like 256 that were killed at that killed at the music festival in the area. And again, the barbarity and it's the incomprehensibility of it. Where do you put that? The degree of hatred. And I guess I want everybody to know that. So people say, well, that's not Islam. I remember after 9/11 when George Bush was saying, and Tony Blair of England was saying, and the Italian president was saying, but Islam means peace. Islam means peace. No, it doesn't. It means submission. A Muslim is one who has submitted to the will of his deity. And the whole concept of Islam is something called jihad. And jihad is a process of bringing the house of war under the authority and the rule of the house of Islam. In other words, to be submitted. Because the Muslim worldview is bifurcated. There's the house of war, which you and I live in, and that's called Dar al-Harb. A lot of people have heard this expression. When I started talking about this about 22 years ago, a lot of people didn't hear about this, but now it's known. And then there's the house of peace. But it's not peace, because if you're not a Muslim and you live under the rule of the house of peace, you're known as something called a dhimmi, dhimmi, and you're subject to more taxation. You're subject to other controls. Back in the days when people were riding horseback or donkeys, if in the presence of a Muslim, you couldn't be on a horse. You had to be walking. And there's even, when we talk about jihad, there's even something called architectural jihad. If you do an examination of Muslim structures in Western European cities and compare them with other, like St. Peter's Cathedral in Rome, you'll find that the mosques, the minaret, the spire on them is higher than the cross on the cathedral. Why is that? Because that's called architectural jihad. We've had economic jihad. Some people are old enough watching this broadcast, and others read it in history, to remember the first time we experienced economic jihad in the West with the imposition of higher gas prices, the concept of odd and even gas days. I remember when gas was 28 cents a gallon,
right,
and it went to 50 cents, and it went to $1, and people were going, "Oh, this can't be possible," And we'd love to have dollar gas today, wouldn't we?
No kidding.
Especially given the inflation. So these what we're seeing today is just another manifestation of a concept that's embedded in about 20% of the Muslim world. But when you figure the size of the population of the Muslim world and figure that's not a small number, we're talking hundreds of millions of people. I was speaking to a Palestinian friend of mine a number of years ago. We used to be on this faculty of the same school when I was working in Saudi Arabia. And I asked him one time, I said, where are the moderate Muslims? And he said, don't you know? And he was telling a fairly well-known joke amongst the Muslim community. He said, A moderate Muslim is one who ran out of bullets.
Oh, wow.
Okay,
Yeah, wow.
right. So the commitment to bring the world under the domination and control of Islam is very real. And I think a lot of people don't understand, especially a lot of Israelis don't understand. Liberal Israelis don't understand. I was listening to some on the radio today, and they're having this horrible time trying to fathom the measures necessary to finish what's been started in Gaza, like turning off the water,
Right.
comes from Israel. Turning off the electricity comes from Israel. Not allowing any petrol shipments in.
So many things to take for granted.
Right. And
Yeah.
so people are saying, well, this is humanitarian. You can't do this. You can't do this. But there are two types of residents in Gaza. Those that are those that are Hamas, and those that live under the rule of Hamas and dare not challenge them. Because if you challenge them,
Wow.
your lifespan is very short. You know, they throw people off of buildings. They do.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about the things they do. It's really, really, really bad.
Right.
And God, you know, God help anybody that's an alternative lifestyle. That doesn't happen either. So in the West, we can't fathom it because we keep believing this mythology that, well, if we're just nice enough to them and give them enough money and show them a more cultured way, then, you know, we'll go shopping in their shops on Friday, and they'll come eat in our restaurants on Saturday night, and we'll all have a good time on Sunday with the Christians. And this kind of kumbaya mentality that just doesn't work in such a case like that. It's a display of weakness. And the only thing that I've understood historically that they understand is strength. And this goes back to a concept. Have we ever talked here on the program about the Islamic concept of the temporary peace to gain a tactical advantage?
I think we did briefly one time. Yeah.
I'll just briefly mention it again because it's apropos here.
Sure. Go ahead.
The founder of Islam, we all know who he was seeking to dominate the Arabian Peninsula. There was one particular tribe in the south, the Qurayshi people, who were stronger than he. And so he made a peace treaty with them. It was supposed to last for 10 years. After 2 years, he gained military superiority and he wiped them out. The treaty that was done 2 years prior to him wiping them out was called the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. How do you spell that? It's one or two. And it became as Rabbi Singer would call it, a dog whistle, kind of a sign to be dropped into Arabic discourse, kind of a wink, wink, like to say, well, we're making this peace. Arafat, Yasser Arafat, mentioned this during the Y Accords in the 90s with Clinton and Yitzhak Rabin and himself. And he said, when we entered this agreement, we did so with faith in the Prophet and the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. And all the journalists went right over their heads. They thought, oh, this is some kind of a precedent for making peace. But it was a sign. It was a wink, wink saying, this is a temporary peace to gain a tactical advantage. So just wait, guys. We're going to gain the upper hand, and then we're going to give it to them. Now, how does that relate to the land of Israel? Well, it very much so. Because any land that was conquered by an Islamic force becomes sacred Islamic land. And so there was a time when the Muslims dominated here. Now, it was a wasteland here. You read what Mark Twain says about it. It was absolute nothing here. The Turks, during their 400-year rule from 1517 to 1917, pillaged the land from all the trees. They used them to make railroad ties, and the place was a total wasteland. But it was an Islamic dominated land. For another power to come in and take over is a catastrophe. In fact, the Arabic name for the day of Israel's independence is called the Day of Catastrophe, Yom Nakba. That's what it's called. And they have another one for the day that Jerusalem was reunified in 1967. Similar kind of a pejorative. So they take that as we have to correct this. We have to reverse this. It's impossible that people who were second-class citizens are now dominating over Muslim peoples. It's a theological contradiction. So the conflict of the Middle East is less political, though politicians make it that way,
right,
and far more theological than anything else.
Right.
And so people don't understand that because, especially in the West, we don't think theologically anymore. And that becomes a huge blind spot. And so we have people coming here and talking to people like Abu Mazen in Ramallah, Mahmoud Abbas. And these words go right over, they're speaking English, but they're not speaking the same language in terms of understanding. So there's another precedent, another agenda going on here. And without understanding that precedent or that agenda, then people are going to totally miss it. And they'll end up making demonstrations in New York on behalf of the poor, persecuted Palestinians when they are really being co-opted by those same people.
Right. So there's an update I got on, I don't know if you guys, I think it's public. You can all join it. It's Jewish Breaking News, JBN. And it says the USS Ford Carrier Strike Group has arrived off the coast of Cyprus and is continuing its movements towards the coast of Israel. Sources indicate the fleet is close enough to be considered in the operation zone. So, Baruch Hashem. That's good. And again,
some help is coming, but
again to voice what you mentioned earlier, to another one that was sent out from the same source was mentioning to the parents out there to have your kids stay off social media, TikTok, all these other social medias for the foreseeable future, I guess you could say, because of the trash that's fixing to get dumped on there from these animals, and you do not want your children exposed to that for sure.
No, and the fact that they would even think that doing that is somehow going to help their cause.
Well,
indeed, at
it's
least
the fear. They're just trying to instill fear in everybody.
Yes, it's the fear factor.
Defeat them mentally. Yep.
Well, I know in East Jerusalem, not far from where I am, they're dancing in the streets and giving out candies. And then one of these wayward rockets yesterday fell on a mosque. The little the west of Jerusalem, it's called Abu Ghosh. Another, I guess, point of concern, of course, is the north.
Yeah.
And I am part of several different WhatsApp groups. One has to do with just monitoring the situation at Ben Gurion Airport, people trying to get out. What about flights, cancellations? It's crazy. There's over 1,000 people in that group, and they're trying to get out and go anywhere. People are going to Ethiopia in order to catch a flight to Rome, to get to London, to get to New York. It's like these kind of crazy dogleg flights. People going to the UAE, to Abu Dhabi, and to the Emirates, to then try to get to Europe or on to America. Different airlines canceling. El Al is still flying. They put on more flights. American Airlines apparently is talking about coming in with more flights, but it's really tricky. So there's the mess at the airport. I'm part of an Aliyah group also, the Aliyah Network, and a lot of conversation because we're linked all over the country. And our chief administrator, David Eskenazi, is up in the north, and there's a lot of concern tonight about the beginnings of shellings, rockets that are coming over from Lebanon, from the Brotherhood group of Hamas, which is Hezbollah, the Party of God, which is heavily sponsored by Iran. A lot of people don't know this necessarily. What's the difference between Shiite Muslims and Sunni Muslims? I guess it's a bit like Baptists, like really independent Baptists, and oneness Pentecostals. It would be that's probably a good way to describe the difference between the two. But over this issue, they are very united and very funded. And of course, the fact that bumbling Biden gave them $6 billion, and that the real figures behind the scenes is even higher than that.
Yeah, I know that there's
again
a question I was going to ask earlier. So Ira mentioned, Rav Yitzhak mentioned that the last time the war in Israel, there was like 51 days, and said there was over 4,500 rockets launched from the enemy in 51 days, and he said that there was the same amount of rockets launched in the first 2 days of this war. So
That's
my question is, does it seem like the rockets, the rocket attacks, the air attacks are slowing down, or are they just like maintaining the speed? Can you tell?
No. If anyone wants to follow this and use it, as I mentioned earlier, when we talk about Tehillim Neged Tilim, if you go to wherever you get your apps for your iPhone or your Android, I know for iPhone it's the App Store, and there's an app called Red Alert Israel, and Red Alert Israel will go off every time there's a detected launch, and it'll tell you the area in Israel where it is, and that's a good time to then pray. That's what a lot of people use it for. But I was watching it go off this afternoon, and it was one alert after another, like 5 or 6 or 7 in a row. North Tel Aviv, South Tel Aviv, Ashkelon, Ashdod, North, South, South Industrial Zone of Ashkelon, North Industrial Zone, communities all around the arc of the 5 by 25 mile long region of the Gaza Strip. It's baffling, and it happens at night, it happens during the day, and what we saw yesterday and today was, I keep using the word arc, the depth of penetration of how far afield those rockets are going is further, much further.
Right.
And in the north, there's even more concern. I won't talk about it, but in the north, there's standpoint of quantity and quality, if you will, of the weaponry. And there's a concern that there's tunnels, and there's a whole variety, a lot of things that have been concerned for years. And so there's a heavy presence, and I think probably a heavy preemptive. Friends of mine have been in touch saying they're going to get out of the area for now.
Yeah.
A lot of people are heading to the center part of the country. I know here in the Jerusalem area, we're asking people to have residences that are vacant, or they have extra room, to take in individuals, couples, families, whatever they can do to provide some calm and some shelter for them.
Sure.
These are critical, again, logistical things that are going on as we're speaking. And then one of my groups I'm involved with has to do something to do with housing, and so these are the things that get kicked in at a time like this.
Okay, so just as some people are just now tuning in or tuned in after we talked about it already, about the safety of the people we know, would you just go in your head just with the list of people that we know and people we might know? What somebody asked about Rabbi Alan Onava, and I know him, but I don't know his status. I don't know if you do or not, but if you could just, a brief update on the people that you know that are safe, and just kind of share that with us if you don't mind.
Sure, I know for sure that Rabbi Singer is fine. We're almost neighbors. We live in the same neighborhood. And as far as I know, he's okay. He's being quiet and being reflective, and he's in a lot of pain over what's going on, as we all are here. Many of you know Shannon, who is a contributor to content here from Beinenu. She's fine. I've been in touch with her 2 or 3 times a day. She's very, very active in her region to mobilize resources and provisions in particular. As for Rabbi Onava, I know who he is. I think we met maybe once, and he's up north, as far as I know. I haven't heard anything otherwise. Most times, the rule of thumb is if you haven't heard anything, you can usually assume the best. If you have the means of reaching out, then by all means do. I've had people reaching out to me that I haven't heard from in a long time, and with gratitude to each of them, and thank you to all of you across the TaNaCh Talk world for your amazing care. William, I just Baruch Hashem, you have been a lightning rod, a catalyst for an extraordinary community that now what are we in our 8th year?
9th, actually.
9th year.
November will make 9 years, so we'll be starting our 10th year after November 14. Yeah.
Amazing. So this is the right use of social media and bringing people together. And so I really don't have a lot to say right now. I mean, there's things I could echo from the news, the last news report that I listened to in Hebrew at 7 o'clock, with the Security Council getting together, and the president of Israel met today for the first time. It was an official meeting with families of those that have abductees that have been taken into Gaza. The number, it's not totally confirmed. The last number I heard was 100, with some Americans included in that figure, and people from the Philippines and Thailand, and it's like crazy stuff and then of course they'll be scattered all over in Gaza. What was interesting, when we talk about Rabbi Singer, he and I were in Gaza together for 2.5 days in 2005. We were part of a support group, I guess, of 125 plus people. Most of them, by the way, evangelicals that came to show their support. They were all wearing orange T-shirts that says "Israel loves the Jews" and orange hats, I remember. And we were in the communities, what were the beautiful communities where 8,000 Jews lived there. And today it's just nothing but rubble. It was amazing to see, and I'll just mention this, and this has to do with the Jews returning to the land and the land responding to the Jews returning to the land. I think it's a great story.
Yeah.
There was one particular greenhouse that we went to visit. I don't remember the name of the place. It was something Katif, Ale Katif, I think. And there were tomatoes on the vines growing out of sand.
Wow.
I couldn't believe it.
Wow.
Now, they used hydroponics, the drip irrigation, which has been so widely developed and then exported across the world from Israel Technologies. And these tomatoes in Israel are like eating a piece of fruit, because a tomato is a fruit.
That's right.
And here it actually tastes really sweet. It's lush. You could eat it by itself because it just is bursting with not just the lycopene that's in it, but it's bursting with real flavor. Tomatoes, at least in America, they're bitter. The little cherry tomato, they're bitter. Here, they're just like candy. You just throw them in a salad with some lettuce and olive oil and vinegar, or lemon juice, and you're just delighted to have it. So why did I mention that about the tomatoes growing out of the sand? Nearby was an old, very old Muslim town called Khan Yunis. Khan is an interesting name. There are various cities called Khan. It's actually a family name out of Pakistan called Khan. A Khan was an inn for caravans. So there's a winery just to the north of Jerusalem that's built in the style, the motif of a Khan. So, place to tie up the camels, the donkeys, whatever. But one of the old Arabs mentioned from Khan Yunis that forever this land would yield nothing. And then the Jews came, and the land just became fruitful. Land that had nothing just suddenly became fruitful. So we see an organic and ecological connection. It's mentioned in the Torah as well, that the land would vomit out those that were violating Hashem's commands, but it would also be very fruitful and bountiful for those that observed his commands.
Right.
And so the description that Mark Twain gave in the 1850s or 60s when he visited here of a land that was a complete wasteland, that's totally changed. And you go around here today and you see the gorgeous beauty that was here, that is here all around, and the unique flowers, the amazing fruits. Went to the shuk near here where I am, and the colors and the flavors and the smells, and it's an amazing thing that's happened in the 75 years since the modern nation of Israel has come together as a state. And so I guess I want to conclude by saying something that somebody said to me in the shuk when we were shopping earlier. He said, Ze Yavor, Hashem Ozer. He said, this is going to pass because Hashem is helping.
Right.
And he's right.
Yep.
What happened Shabbat morning, this few days ago, may have taken all of us here by surprise, but Hashem was not surprised. And so when we have the story of that lady Rachel and her heroism, and there are other stories that are coming out of dramatic, phenomenal things. It doesn't diminish in any way the gravity, the severity, the worry, the concern of what happened through the barbarism that has been witnessed. But on the other hand, the flip side of it, it inspires hope and faith in the fact that someone, Hine lo yanum v'lo yishan shomer Yisrael. I'm quoting from Psalm 121. The one who guards Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. And Yomama shemesh lo yakeka. During the day, the sun will not strike you. V'yareach b'layla, and the moon at night. And that Hashem shomer tzeitcha v'oecha me'ata v'aron. Hashem will guard your going out and your coming in from this time forth forever. So Psalm 121, by the way, is one of those that we say in times of distress. Psalm 121, Psalm 130, Psalm 20, Psalm 23, which everybody knows. These are good ones to weave into your spiritual practice. And so I want to thank everybody. First of all, I thank you, William.
Yes, sir. Very welcome.
He's the greatest friend to thousands and thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people, to provide us with wisdom and guidance and nurture through the years here, and now at this time. So if you want to do another update, and I'll specifically focus on some outlets that people can contribute if you want to, I'll be happy to put that together in the next 24 for you.
Okay, very good. I appreciate that very much. And so, guys, if you have specific questions that you would like to have answered, just send them to me at william@TaNaCh.com. So I think it's actually on here. Let me see. Yeah, it is. Just send them to this email address right here, william@TaNaCh.com. And just put in the memo or questions, and then if we can answer them, we will. If not, maybe we can find the answers and then relay them back to you. But I thank you all for your support and for tuning in, and keep praying for Israel. Love you guys. Thank you.
And my email's on the screen there if you need me for some reason.
Yes.
Or if you don't need me for some reason, I'm here.
Right.
So thank you very much for tuning in, everyone.
Yeah, very good. Thank you all. Take care.